Alright, hi everyone. I'm recording this screencast to go along with this blog post that I wrote a couple of months ago. This basically teaches you how you can use React with Django CMS. Django CMS is one of the most popular content management system in Django. It has very powerful editorial tools. For example, front-end editing. You could create as many pages as you want, as flexible plugins as you want, and it's all built on top of Django Python. So it's very powerful in terms of you can do anything. Well, why React? React has been the go-to front-end UI framework for almost a decade now. It's insanely powerful. The community is really big, and you get a lot of plugins for pretty much everything you want to do. You could build interactive applications. The problem is how do we end up integrating Django and React so that we get the best of both worlds, and at the same time we don't need to switch domains or set up another application or host it somewhere like, I don't know, Vercel or Netlify just for the React bit. Actually, you could do all of that in a single place with Django CMS, and this is what we'll go through. Let's go through the code and let's see how we can get this done. To start with, I have a static directory, and inside the static directory, inside JavaScript, I have a React application that is called jobs. It has a bunch of code. It uses TypeScript, TSX to be precise, and it is bundled using Vite and uses Tailwind, VTest. It's pretty much standard stack nowadays in the JavaScript world. What we are going to do is we will run this application and we'll see how it looks, and then we'll start thinking about how we could integrate this. So if I run start, it should open application for me. As you could see, is a simple CRUD based view. So for example, if I click here, it should take me to the detail, which basically is a job opening where there are some stuff about the job, what kind of position it is, and address and whatnot. And you can again go back to the overview using this. If we look at how this is built, it's built using React, of course, and it's also built on top of React Router. React Router basically gives you an ability so that you can render a certain application based on their routes or URL, right? If you go to the starting index.tsx, we close this one, you will see that this basically has some code where there's one component that's called latest jobs. We go to the definition of that. It basically writes a bunch of HTML where there are some more components that would render the detail based on the data that we are getting. Of course, it's reading JSON data, and you could either call an API. It could be an authenticated API or public API. Either way it works. So we have that kind of React application here. Now let's see how we could integrate this further. That this application just lives inside this location, and it is pretty much an independent React application that you could just run. So you basically have to cd to this directory and just run npm run start or yarn start, and it will run it for you. It's very loosely coupled in that sense, so that you don't have to integrate using Django based build system, something like you would do in Ruby on Rails. that has its own build system where you could build JavaScript and CSS and everything using one unified building mechanism. Here we don't really need that kind of integration, and these could just live in their own world. This also makes it very easy for the front end members of your team, where they could just seed it as a directory and they're in their familiar territory, and they don't really need to know or understand how Django or Django CMS or the backend framework works, and they could just do what they're good at doing, and yeah, they should be done with it. Now we'll see how we integrate this with Django. uh, Following Django's convention, you should name your applications and the static assets using the same name. What it gives you is that it gives you a unified structure and how you could navigate the code base. So you could go and look at the application data, and at the same time you could also just go and find the static assets. Over here it's a React application, it could have been something else as well. Let's go and look at our Django app. To start with, we should first go to the settings file. Let's search for jobs. So you see that I added this application that lives inside apps jobs into our installed apps, so that Django is able to pick that up. Now I should also show you the URLs. This is standard URL pattern. There is an admin URL, there is a media setting, and then there is another CMS URL. This is standard you have to do if you are working with Django CMS or Django for that matter. Now let's go to the application at our hand. We would go to urls.py. You see that urls.py define a route, which basically gives you a list of the jobs. And alright, we have a class, so we can go to the definition of that. Over here, this is nothing but a template view. A template view is a simple Django view, pretty much the simplest, where you can just pass it a template. You can pass along some data in the context, and it knows how to render that. Let's look at some other important files that we have apart from views. We have something called as cms_apps.py. It is one of the very powerful feature of Django CMS, where it gives you a way to register an application, a Django application per se, as a Django CMS application, so that Django CMS knows where the application is located and is able to pick that up. And you could do insanely powerful things over here, which I'll show you how we did that. The definition is simple. It has an app name, the name of the application, so it shows up in the pages settings. It also has apps.py, which is also default, so you have to define an app config. So this is a subclass of app config that's called jobs config. We give it some default auto field, which is pretty much standard since Django 4.2, if I'm not wrong. And let's also have a look at the job_list.html, which is our template for this template view. So this, for people who are familiar with Django CMS, this is a simple template where we extend the CMS template. What happens is Django CMS templates are also quite powerful. You could define different kind of templates, and Django CMS is smart enough to pick the one that you choose for a particular page. This will basically extend that page and let you add data in the placeholders. The benefit being, or blocks, the benefit being, you're able to follow the same theming and same style of the page, and your React application doesn't look out of place or alien to that experience that we are going to provide. We are also loading some important tags One is called CMS tags, another Sekizai tags, and static. CMS tags lets you add the template tags like block. Sekizai lets you add to block.js. What add to block.js does is, if we have a base template, and the base template, if we have defined JS, this will basically render the JavaScript that we are going to pass along in the context and add it in the script tag in the correct place. Same goes with CSS. It will, get those data from the context, and then it will just pass it along. We'll go into more detail about these, about how these work and why there is a loop running through the CSS and JavaScript. We'll take care of all of that in just a minute. All right. So if you have a look at these variables, these look pretty peculiar, and let's just see what they are about. Since this is a template and all of these variables, or for example, this is a list of JavaScript links. How are they coming? They are being passed into context. That much is clear. So we go to views.py, and let's have a look at this. Let's read the code. Get context data is how you pass data into the context. And so basically this is a super call to the base class, and then there is this method, get CSS and JavaScript link from vt assets, which is very interesting for us. Let's have a look at that. Now, what this does, this is a function that you pass along a project type, which is basically the namespace of the application. For us, it was jobs. And there is another users client. So basically it knows how to build that application for the client side or the server side. And it returns a tuple of list of strings because it could either be, if you look at the return, it's either these three that get returned. Now, before we move any further, you should know that if you build a React application, especially if they are built using Vite, the TypeScript or the JavaScript or JSX for that matter, they get compiled, bundled into minified JavaScript and CSS. And when you run it in any place, you basically run in a production mode, you run it with those JavaScript, the minified and compiled JavaScript and CSS. That's how those React applications work. It's important that we also go through the React application bit so we understand how things exactly work. To do that, we need to go to this index.html file. Index.html file is a standard file that will be present in pretty much every React application. It contains a bunch of HTML, standard HTML with some meta tags. I'm using Tailwind, so that's why there is Tailwind in here. Some CSS to give it some sort of maintainable styling. And this is the most important bit of it. What we have here is a root element. A root element is what we need to mount a React application. What React application or React runtime code does, it finds out the root application, and then it will generate the DOM, add some event handlers, some hooks, whatnot, and this is how it plugs into the application architecture. Now this index.html is something that we have for this React application. This is, like I said, we wrote this application in such a manner that a front-end application engineer is able to just run it, do their work, and if we have plugged this in a certain manner, so we get all the benefits and all the logic that are implemented in here, they get hooked into the our Django application. Let me just also show you how this is very similar to another file, another HTML file that we looked. So let's go to the job list.html file, and let's see the same root element is also in here, and it's using the same ID, same class, same URL, same base URL. What the benefit of this is, it knows, because we wrote the React application to take this as a root element. When the JavaScript of the compiled React and the CSS is put into this page, the React application just thinks, okay, this is the same application. I have the JavaScript, I have the CSS, I can put the whole experience of that job application, the React one, in here. So once that is clear, let's see how this whole thing works. One important thing to remember is we will be using the compiled JavaScript and CSS files that is built using all this code for React, and it gets built. So if you run, if you go to pack, I've already built it, but if you're trying it from our application, you can just do it on your own. So if you run this build, either script here, or you can just do yarn run build or npm run build, and it will do read build, and it will build the application for you. It will contain this format. The files will be in this structure. Manifest.json is one file where it will tell you where all your compiled JavaScript. So you see this is a JavaScript file which is under a certain hash. You also have your main.css file. You have this main dot some hash.javascript file. Let's just for completeness sake, let's run this. You see this is building the application, and build the application manifest, the CSS file, and the JavaScript file. Let's see if the name is same. Yeah, looks the same to me. Let's also look at the manifest.json. Yeah, it's here. Now what we're going to do is manifest.json is basically the file that gave me an idea of how I could hook up Django CMS with React, because it basically told me the location of the compiled JavaScript file. And compiled JavaScript file, this file that contains the React application runtime in our own code, so that if I could somehow put that in the same place in the DOM with same root, I will be able to run this application as if it's just running on just using npm run start or wheat or whatever. So for it there is exactly no difference out there. Now going back to the utils that I was going through earlier, where we have what it does, it based on your application slug, it finds out the path of the manifest.json file, and then we read this manifest file in Python, which is over here, manifest path open in read mode with UTF-8 encoding. We get the dictionary out of it from the JSON, and once we have that, we will iterate over the JavaScript, CSS. So there are three kinds of JavaScript, two kinds of JavaScript, and one CSS that would be outputted in the manifest.json, given the application is like that. And you will get the list of CSS, JavaScript links, and main JS link that we will return to the view. And over here in the view, what it does, you see the namespace. So this is the same application, and we also set up the files in the JavaScript in a similar manner, so we are able to fetch these links easier. And you see we put in the CSS and JavaScript links in the context, which gets passed along to the job_list.html. Now this is the code structure. Now let's see if we can get this to work. We have here is we have a Django CMS application running. I took the liberty of creating a home page and I just created a jobs page. This is just a simple vanilla page called as jobs. There's nothing special to it yet. Now, how do we configure this? So now if you remember that we created an app hook in the application, the jobs application over here, which basically gave it a name. Now, app hook is something that you can attach to pages. I already have a Django server running over here. And yeah, let's see. Now, how we get this to work is we go to the page settings and we will need to go to the advanced settings, which would be somewhere over here. Let's go back. What does it say? Advanced settings over here, and you would see that in the application list we have a jobs app which is the same that we defined. We could select that and we select a namespace and we can save it. Now once you save it, for an app hook to be available you need to publish the page or restart your server. That's how app hooks work. We will go with publishing the page. And let's see. Now what we have here is you would see that the jobs page that we created and we basically hooked it up to a jobs application, it has now started showing up this content. Now let's look at the DOM. Let's switch it to the side so we can see what's going on. You see that they are actually not rendered by the server, but they are actually rendered by our React application because they are inside the root. And we already went through the job list.html file and there is basically nothing like that. These are all coming from React. Let's also dig deeper. You see that they are not just links, they are also pointing to a URL. Now the great part about this setup is these. If I click on this, I will go to a URL. You look at this URL. This is basically running on top of Django because this is running on localhost 8000. The URL and this slug, these are all being handled by React and React Router to be precise. And this lets you delegate the routing part of this application over to React when you are specifically on that jobs page, which we offloaded the responsibility to our jobs application, which is essentially taking a React and React Router application and putting on that page. Now we could go back, takes you to the same page, so it remembers a URL. You can go back and forth all the time. You can go to other openings, you could see. And yeah, all right, the beautiful part about this whole setup is you could pretty much take any React application or any Vue application or an Angular application, and that is able to do routing on its own. So it's basically able to render a specific component based on the route, just like how React Router does. In theory, even those applications could be made to work. You just need to follow this directory structure, which is time tested. I've used this in production for more than 3 years, and very successfully I was able to delegate work with our team where people that were not super confident with Django, and they were very good React developers, and they were able to work on it. So you could just use the code, use your existing application, and seamlessly hook it up with Django CMS, and you see this for end user, they honestly they shouldn't know, and they don't have to know if it's built using multiple technologies working. It's built on React or Django. I mean, they just get a unified experience and a much better experience at that, because a single domain serving normal pages. So this is a Django CMS page. Just yeah, put something in it in the home page. For example, I can just put a text plugin. Yeah, save it. We have something, right? And we can publish it. So this just becomes live, and you can just go to any of these pages. This page is for React. I could have another page. For example, let's create another page for contact us or something. Save, and I can just go here. I can edit it. I can add some content. Contact, or I don't know. Just use anything. Contact us. Right. So something like this, and it would just work. I will take you through the code once again to explain how, just give a summary of how things are working here. You need a settings.py where you define an application. We use this application as a way to hook it up with Django CMS, which is done using cms_apps.py. We have a URL and view. This URL will this view basically put things into context. So we are able to find the path of the CSS in JavaScript, and we pass it in the context. The context in turn is being used to render this template, which contains a root element, which all React will hook up with, and all the templates tags are over here for JavaScript and CSS, and this lets you render the CSS and JavaScript in the correct order, which is important. And just like this, you are able to have a React application just neatly integrated with Django CMS without much issues, without going through a very difficult or peculiar setup. This doesn't assume you to change your React way or Django way. This just lets you work in your own way, and this still gives you a very nice and tight integration with which you can just use a React application or any other front-end application that indeed works in the similar fashion, and you're able to just hook it up and take advantage of rich ecosystem of Django CMS, and React for that matter. Yeah, that's it. I think if you have any questions, you can post in the comments, and in future I can just have more detailed tutorials on how to do similar stuff.